Hey legends, tonight we're not storming castles or munching turkey legs at a royal feast. Nope, we're wading nose first into the pungent, personal, proudly unwashed universe of medieval hygiene. Picture it, an age when folks feared bathwater like it was the Grim Reaper's hot tub, garlic occasionally moonlighted as eau de parfum, and your neighbor's idea of garbage day was flinging unmentionables out the window with a casual mind the splash. Before you settle in, smash that like button, but only if this channel actually tickles your brain, and tell me in the comments which part of the planet you're tuning in from. Bonus points if you include the exact hour, so we can marvel at our collective insomnia. Go ahead, dim the lights, maybe crank on a fan for that soothing I'm clearly in a 14th century tavern hum, and let's tiptoe together into a time when soap was basically black magic. Cleanliness is next to godliness, said absolutely nobody sporting a pair of 1340s woolen trousers. In fact, early medieval Europe did flirt with the idea that bathing might be kinda cool. Monasteries kept bath hours, some die-hard towns clung to Roman soak and scrub traditions, and for a nanosecond hot water was fashionably healthy. Then everything went full gremlin. Blame a cocktail of superstition, bad science and clergy side-eye. Scholars who thought germs were demons auditioning for your spleen argued that steamy water opened the pores, effectively transforming you into a walking sponge for plague. Bathe during an outbreak, you might as well tattoo "Please possess me" mysterious miasma on your forehead. Throw in the minor detail that bathhouses had evolved into medieval singles bars, equal parts jacuzzi and 50 shades of Gregorian chant, and church officials began connecting scrub-a-dub time with sin, faster than you could say body and loofah. Public tubs got padlocked, monks were scolded for enjoying bubbles, and ordinary folks concluded it was holier and way less scandalous to stay dry, stinky, and clothed. Did this mean everyone wandered around like feral compost heaps? Not quite. They practiced strategic spot cleans, hands, faces, feet, and whatever region had recently hosted a flea circus. Full body immersion, however, was reserved for the filthy rich, the terminally itchy, or that one brave cousin who thought rashes were a myth. Once upon a time, back when a town didn't yet smell like horse breath and regret, the public bathhouse was the place to be. Imagine a Roman spa with fewer mosaics and more gossip. Merchants soaked beside monks, lower nobles discussed grain prices while pruning like raisins, and everyone emerged pink, relaxed, and only mildly traumatized by communal nudity. Cue the plot twist. By the 1200s, bathhouses started doubling as multi-service establishments. For a few extra coins you could add music, ale, and a suspiciously affectionate attendant to your soak. Hygiene blurred with hanky-panky, and the moral police lost their collective minds. The Black Death rolled into town soon after, and people happily nailed boards across the bathhouse doors. Can't catch plague in a tub if the tub's been condemned for naughtiness, they reasoned. Monastic brethren grumbled. Some monasteries had timetabled baths in their rulebooks, but the damage was done. Hot water joined tarot cards, and left-handedness on the list of things probably summoned by Satan. Soap became optional, water became menacing, and the bathhouse faded into folklore, occasionally repurposed as a bakery, because why wouldn't you proof dough where strangers once exfoliated? Let's pop into a noble bedchamber, shall we? Servants lug barrels of boiling water, indoor plumbing, science fiction, pour it into a wooden tub lined with linen, and sprinkle in herbs. Lavender if you're posh, whatever isn't clinging to goat droppings if you're merely upper-middle feudal. You climb in, effectively transforming yourself into a pricey human stew. Privacy is negotiable. Sometimes spouses share the bath, sometimes half the household spectates because modesty is overrated when you've got 37 layers of lace to remove. Peasants, meanwhile, improvise, river dips in summer, barrel baths when lucky, and the ever-popular sponge wipe next to the hearth when winter hits like a trebuchet. Efficiency ruled. Why not dunk the baby, the tunic, and the family goat in one session? Soap. If you owned a sliver, you hoarded it like dragon treasure. With full baths deemed a VIP ticket to disease, the era embraced the quasi-clean method. Picture a washcloth soaked in warm vinegar plus rosemary bits, followed by a delicate pat-down of all strategic zones. Think car wash, but the car is your armpit and the sponge is aggressively scratchy linen. Nobles outsourced the job to attendants, judgment sold separately. Peasants boiled water over a smoky fire, and monks followed schedules stricter than modern gyms. End result, you smelled like pickled salad but felt smugly sanitary. Shampoo? Adorable fantasy. Instead, folks whipped up DIY potions, lye soap, ashes plus animal fat, scalp apocalypse. Raw egg yolk masks, breakfast for your bangs, or straight-up beer rinses, making every tavern brawl smell like salon day. Hot water could weaken your brain, cold water might summon plague.
so lukewarm splash and squeeze became the Goldilocks zone. Combs carved from bone or horn provided the finishing touch and a handy way to scoop lice into the nearest candle flame. Dental hygiene was less Colgate sparkle, more I still possess a majority of my teeth, your move. Linen rags dipped in salt or crushed mint did service as scrubbers, chew sticks frayed into wannabe toothbrushes, and mouth rinses ranged from vinegar to embalming-grade myrrh water. Cavities. See your local barber, who will happily yank that tooth free of your skull with the same pliers he uses on pig hooves. Anesthetic. Try screaming in Latin. Medieval streets smelled like a fondue of fish guts, tanner's acid and sweaty optimism. To cope, elites wore pomanders, hollow metal orbs stuffed with cloves, musk, or ambergris. Spoiler, that's whale vomit but fancy. Ladies hid lavender sachets in corsets, some even braided herbs into their hair to turn every head flip into aromatherapy. Perfume imports from the Middle East cost a fortune but could disguise last week's cabbage fumes, worth every coin. Actual sweat management? Welcome to alum powder, chalk dust, and sage leaf paste, basically deodorizing by turning your pits into a spice rack. Physicians preached that sweating expelled bad humors, so antiperspirant was borderline heresy. The solution: accept the musk, brandish a perfumed handkerchief, and pray your neighbor's aroma was worse than yours. Enter the unsung hero: fresh linen undergarments. Breathable, washable, and socially acceptable to wave in public river currents. Linen layers soaked up grime so your wool cloak didn't. People might skip bathing for weeks, but swapping a shirt twice a week? Saintly behavior. Of course, washing linen meant boiling, beating, and bleaching until the river looked like a witch's cauldron. But hey, priorities. Everyone had lice. Kings scratched, peasants scratched, even the Pope probably scratched under that hat. Remedies included fine-tooth combs, baking clothes by the hearth, or even accidental house fires or full head shaves. Fleas joined the circus too, prompting smoky fumigation sessions that doubled as backyard barbecues, minus the burgers. Need to go in a castle? Enter the garderobe, a stone bench with a hole that dropped your business straight into the moat, the courtyard, or some unfortunate guard's nightmares. Peasants squatted behind barns, used communal pits or wielded chamber pots by night, contents flung streetward each morning with a jaunty garde-lo. Accuracy optional. Toilet paper, moss, rags, or your dignity. Snow if you were lucky. The linen may have kept stench at arm's length, but sooner or later, everyone needed to confront the elephant in the odor: soap. Here's the trouble. Medieval soap was the chemical equivalent of a drunken mule, unpredictable, stubborn, and prone to kicking your skin clean off. Down in the alleys behind every butcher's stall, cauldrons bubbled with an unholy mixture of rendered sheep tallow and wood ash lye. Stir that cauldron too slowly, and you got gritty brown sludge. Too quickly, and you'd invent medieval napalm. Once cooled, the concoction hardened into waxy hunklets, so caustic they could chase grease off an iron skillet, or exfoliate your epidermis straight into the afterlife. Even the bravest washerwomen treated a new batch of soap like a live dragon egg. One miscalculated scrub in a peasant's hands might emerge as red as a bishop's robes. That's why serious laundry day looked more like a joust: leather gloves, grim faces, and a whispered prayer to Saint Suds of Nowhere in particular. Refined folks yearned for Castile soap, the Spanish superstar made with olive oil instead of carcass goo. It smelled faintly of sunshine and economic privilege, which meant only merchants rich off wool taxes could afford it. The rest of Europe kept pretending the smell of burnt mutton was earthy. Picture dawn on the village green. Washerwomen hefting baskets so large they'd make modern gym bros sprain a deltoid. First came the pre-soak in chamber lye. That's fermented pee, if you're new here. Then the clothes were dragged to the river, slapped against stones like unruly carp, and beaten with paddles until the fibers begged for mercy. The foaling phase followed, rolling cloth underfoot or with wooden bats to shrink and thicken wool. Locals called the rhythmic thumping the devil's drumline, which is accurate if you imagine Satan demanding ever whiter undershirts. By evening, the meadow transformed into a fluttering gallery of tunics and hose flapping on bushes, hedges, and anything vaguely upright. It resembled a Renaissance art installation called Society of Drip-Dry Desperation. Clean garments, filthy river. Circle of Life, medieval edition. Did any of this madness keep people alive? Short answer, yes, sort of, on a sliding scale measured in pox marks rather than pearly white smiles. While you'd recoil from the average 14th century aroma, contemporaries measured cleanliness by social signals: a fresh linen smock, hair not currently ablaze, and only moderate lice activity. By that definition, many were nailing it. Some methods even hold up to modern scrutiny. Vinegar rinses, mildly antibacterial. Herb-infused washwater, fragrant and insect repellent. Linen layers, breathable moisture-wicking technology centuries ahead of its Under Armour descendants. Granted, germ theory was still a twinkle in future microscopes, so most strategies were powered by superstition. But paranoia can incidentally save lives. If you believe bathwater courts the plague, you'll also avoid drinking from the cesspit. Accidental wins count. Enough with the mud and mothballs. Let's pivot 3,000 years backward and sideways to a civilization that treated hygiene like a competitive sport, the Indus Valley. Strap in, the scent profile improves dramatically from goat curd sauna to earthen spa with artisan drainage. Interlude, story warp. Imagine stumbling from a reeking medieval lane through a wormhole that dumps you onto the sun-baked streets of Mohenjo-Daro, circa 2500 BCE. Instead of chamber pot roulette, you find straight-edge boulevards, brick houses with indoor bathrooms and sewers humming beneath your sandals like well-oiled harp strings. Time travel nosejob complete. Laid out on a perfect orthogonal grid, Mohenjo-Daro looked less like an ancient town and more like an architect's fever dream. Every residence, rich or run-of-the-kiln modest, had its own bathing chamber with runoff sloping into covered street drains. That's right, private ensuite plumbing, while half of medieval Europe still believed water demons lived in bathtubs. Up on the Citadel Mound, public granaries sat beside the Great Bath, a massive watertight pool whose brickwork was so precise modern engineers have wept into lattes after studying it. Was it ritual cleansing? Community cannonball contest? Either way, the Indus folks decided civic identity begins with a good scrub. Even more astonishing, archaeologists can't find royal palaces or war monuments. Power here manifested as standardized weights, equal access to wells, and an obsession with drainage angles. Eat your heart out, Metropolitan Zoning Board. Now hop forward a millennium and scoot west to Mesopotamia. Babylon in its Nebuchadnezzar, prime swaggered behind walls glazed lapis blue and roaring with gold-tiled lions. The Ishtar Gate wasn't just a door, it was a neon billboard saying "Welcome to Maximum Extra." Babylonian planners aligned their grand processional way, so religious parades marched in perfect cosmic choreography straight to Marduk's ziggurat. Water? The Euphrates bisected town, feeding canals and clay pipe plumbing into elite houses, complete with rudimentary flushes that relied on servants wielding buckets like nervous firemen. Their zoning philosophy merged sacred spectacle with municipal efficiency. Market squares buzzed near temple precincts, while scribes tabulated grain quotas in shadowy record offices. If Mohenjo-Daro was an Excel spreadsheet, Babylon was a PowerPoint deck animated by the gods themselves. Fast forward yet again, but this time jet across the planet to central Mexico. 500 CE, Teotihuacan rises from the plateau, a city laid out to cosmic specifications, pivoted 15.5 degrees off true north, because the sun and stars commanded it so. Here, urban design was sacred geometry. The 2-mile Avenue of the Dead funneled pilgrims between the Pyramid of the Moon and the gargantuan Pyramid of the Sun. Shadow-casting calendars carved in stone. Residential compounds formed modular blocks, some posh, some proletarian, all plumbed with drains to whisk away stormwater before monsoon tantrums turned streets to soup. Teotihuacan even practiced multicultural zoning. Entire barrios housed immigrants who built it in their home styles. Gulf Coast stucco here, Maya-flavored murals there, like an ancient UNESCO model village, minus the souvenir kiosks. The takeaway? While Europeans fretted over demon-ridden bathwater, past civilizations elsewhere were piping freshwater into basins, measuring bricks to the millimeter, and drafting neighborhood covenants under the stars. Hygiene and high-density living can coexist. Just ask any Indus Valley building inspector still haunting the ruins. Rome liked its emperors loud, Julius with his laurel swagger, Nero fiddling while fireworks decimated real estate, Trajan stamping passports in new provinces. Then along sauntered Publius Elatheus Hadrianus. Hadrian if you're on a first-name basis, a cultured gadget of contradictions, soldier who hated war, poet who built fortresses, bearded Hellenophile who nevertheless ran the world's largest clean-shaven bureaucracy. Strap in, we're trading chamberpot dodgeball for imperial road trips, philosophical midlife crises, and more architectural flexing than a millennial Instagram feed. Hadrian blasted into history circa 76 CE in Italica, Hispania, a Romanized patch of sun-scorched Spain where olive groves outnumbered ambitions. His parents died before he'd memorized his Latin declensions, so guardianship landed with cousin Trajan, the future conqueror who'd eventually gift him the keys to the empire. Young Hadrian, instead of reenacting sword epics with neighborhood lads, buried his nose in Homer and tried to out-Greek the Greeks. Classmates nicknamed him Graculus, Little Greek half-tease, half-prophecy. Military service, however, was mandatory brand building for any senatorial wunderkind. Hadrian marched along the muddy Danube, crunching frost and barbarian side-eyes, all while scribbling lyrical descriptions of spruce forests in his field journal. Officers debated whether he was brilliant or just weird. Turns out he was brilliantly weird, a combination beginners can't replicate without serious caffeine. Trajan conquered every landscape that didn't sprint away, On his deathbed, he allegedly adopted Hadrian via bedside paperwork of dubious notarization. Some senators smelled forgery, others smelled Plotina, Trajan's politically savvy wife, shoving the adoption quill into place. Regardless, on 11 August 1117 CE, Rome got itself an emperor who preferred geometry to gladiators. Barely unpacked in the Palatine Palace, Hadrian stared at Trajan's bloated empire. Mesopotamian sandstorms, rebellious Armenian hills, Syrian supply lines stretched like old tunics and did the unthinkable, withdrew the legions. Instead of high fives, he received Senate scowls. 4 particularly mouthy senators found themselves inconveniently dead, under charges flimsier than an imperial bath towel. Lesson delivered. Philosopher doesn't mean pushover. Where most emperors sent legates, Hadrian sent his own sandals. He kicked off an imperial world tour so exhaustive pigeons grew jealous. Gaul, Germania, Britannia, Africa, Balkans, Asia Minor, every province hosted the emperor, his scribes, his architects, and his boundless curiosity. In northern Britain he stared into the mist, weighed Roman casualties against Caledonian obstinacy, and sketched a line across the island like a bored student with a ruler. Soon pickaxes rang, and 73 miles of stone Hadrian's wall rose from coast to coast, a statement etched in mortar. Expansion is clenched fist vanity, maintenance is grown-up power. Troops grumbled at the weather, but secretly appreciated a barrier that let them sleep without Scottish raids redecorating their camp. Down in Egypt, crowds hailed him as a living god. He almost drowned in the Nile, but emerged laughing, took notes on irrigation canals, and probably corrected a priest's geometry mid-ceremony. In Athens, he binge-funded temples, libraries, and policy thinkins. Greek philosophers finally met a Roman patron who could recap Socrates without mispronouncing daimonion. Hadrian's brain contained a CAD suite before computers were cool. Back in Rome, he demolished Agrippa's charred pantheon and resurrected it into the concrete and cosmos marvel we still ogle today. Imagine the swagger, a dome 43 meters across, poured in layered aggregates so perfect even modern engineers check for hidden steel. An oculus at the top invites daylight and occasional rain to spill onto marble floors, reminding worshippers the universe is both open-plan and tax-deductible. East of the city, he built Villa Adriana at Tivoli, 250 acres of architectural fanfiction. One courtyard channeled Egyptian lotus vibes, another recreated a sun-drenched Greek stoa. There was a micro-Nile canal where swans and philosophical debates cruised simultaneously. The complex basically invented staycation as world tour, centuries before Disney felt jealous. But stone alone didn't thrill him. He reorganized provincial bureaucracies, standardized legal precedents, and introduced inspections called circuitous surprise audits where he'd pop into a fortress, praise the latrines, then question the legate's accounting, until said legate aged 5 years and 30 minutes. Somewhere amid Anatolian daisies, Hadrian met Antinous, a Bithynian youth with cheekbones sharp enough to slice papyrus. The emperor, middle-aged, married in name only to Vibia Sabina, and hungry for sublime companionship, fell hard. Ancient gossip scrolls differ. Was Antinous a servant, a court favorite, a bodyguard with poetry ambitions? Regardless, their bond fused mentor, muse, and unabashed romance. Tragedy stalked them down the Nile in 130 CE. Antinous drowned. Accidental slip, ritual sacrifice, or maybe suicide, the sources feud eternally, but Hadrian's grief incinerated protocol. He wept publicly, deified the boy, founded Antinopolis on the riverbank, and commissioned statues across the empire. Workshops churned out serene, curly-haired Antinous busts at lightning speed. He became the ancient world's posthumous pinup, a symbol of youth, renewal, and grief wrapped in one sandstone package. For all his marble-soft aesthetics, Hadrian could snap harder than a pilum. Hoping to unify cultures, he decided to refound Jerusalem as Aelia Capitolina, and top the ruined Temple Mount with a shrine to Jupiter. Jewish residents read the memo and saw sacrilege, insert simmering tensions, heavy Roman boots, and one charismatic rebel named Simon Bar Kokhba, claiming messianic credentials. Revolt detonated in 1302 CE. Hadrian unleashed General Julius Severus and an army seasoned by northern drizzle. What followed was scorched earth warfare, villages leveled, forests felled, 500,000 dead by Roman reckoning. Judea was renamed Syria Palestina, Jewish survivors scattered. The emperor's travel diary now contained a black ink chapter proving that the man who built perfect baths also raised dissidents with grim efficiency. Disease crept in by 133 CE, probably congestive heart failure, maybe kidney woes, but Hadrian, ever analytical, documented symptoms like a researcher studying himself. Lethargy, edema, bouts of suicidal despair. He composed the haunting poem Animula Vagula Blandula, a farewell to his wandering soul that still stuns Latin students on rainy Tuesday lectures. Succession nearly unraveled him. First he adopted Lucius Aelius,
dashing but consumptive, who promptly died after hosting one too many wine and mustache evenings. Next he tapped Antoninus Pius, but only if Antoninus adopted young Marcus Aurelius. Brilliant contingency plan. 2 solid emperors for the price of 1 deathbed decree. On 10 July 1308 CE, Hadrian exhaled his last inside his Tiburtine dreams, leaving behind a cylinder mausoleum on the Tiber, later Castel Sant'Angelo, and an empire more stable, cultured, and self-aware than he'd found. Historians still debate where to shelve him, tyrant or humanist, conqueror or curator. Truth is, he was Rome's walking paradox, and the marble doesn't talk, it just stands there looking timeless. Enough marble dust. Snap on a cownskin cap and fast forward to 1803, the United States barely out of political diapers. President Thomas Jefferson just impulse bought Louisiana from Napoleon, effectively telling a room full of stunned congressmen, "Surprise, our backyard now reaches the Rocky Mountains." Trouble, nobody had the faintest clue what beasties, rivers, or potentially cranky nations lived in that yard. Enter Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, the ultimate buddy explorers. Jefferson chose Lewis, his bright-eyed private secretary with wilderness swagger and a habit of labeling everything with Latin. Lewis recruited William Clark, an old military pal whose cartographic skill and calm thunderclap voice could pacify rowdy privates. Congress reluctantly funded what sounded like a cross between a science fair and a camping trip from hell. By May 1804, 33 men soldiers, boatmen, a high-spirited enslaved man named York, and enough biscuits to tile a courthouse shoved off from Camp Dubois near St. Louis. Upstream against the Missouri they battled quicksand bars, mosquitoes vast enough to steal oars, and midday temperatures turning rifle barrels into brand new branding irons. Progress, a whopping 1 mile per human-sized kidney stone of effort. Late summer found the Core and Sioux country negotiating trade, friendship, and the awkward question, who exactly sold you this territory? Lewis distributed Jeffersonian peace medals like commemorative fridge magnets, hoping the engraved handshake would overshadow the keelboat's intimidating swivel cannon. Tribal councils ranged from welcoming pipe sharing to standoffs where arrows hovered one bad joke away from launch. Somehow nobody died, except Sergeant Charles Floyd, felled by a ruptured appendix doctors couldn't pronounce, let alone fix. Ice shackled the Missouri, so the Corps built Fort Mandan beside the hospitable Earth Lodge villages of the Mandan and Hidatsa. Here Lewis turned cabin corners into makeshift labs, bottling insects in whiskey and timing lunar eclipses. Clark sketched maps with such accuracy modern GPS gasped in admiration. Enter Toussaint Charbonneau, French-Canadian trader of questionable reliability, and his Shoshone wife, Sacagawea, pregnant and unflappable. She negotiated horses, foraged edible roots, and would soon rescue priceless journals from a capsized boat, all while parenting an infant swaddled in cradleboard chic.
Spring thaw launched the expedition back into current. When the river thundered over 5 consecutive waterfalls near present-day Great Falls, Montana, Lewis felt simultaneous awe and dread. Boats couldn't pass, supplies couldn't vanish. The answer? Drag everything across 18 miles of cactus-studded prairie, in thunderstorms merciless as Viking drummers. Crew built makeshift wagons, hoisted 600-pound pirogues, and pushed uphill while hailstones punched welts the size of musket balls. Wheels shattered, grizzlies lurked, everyone grew sun-poached, but the job got done. Victory tasted like blister ointment and bear grease. At the river's headwaters, the geography romance died. 3 slender forks, the Jefferson, Madison, and Gallatin, merged, but none tunneled through the Rockies as dreams had promised. Instead, the Bitterroot Range loomed with peaks sharper than Jefferson's quills. Thanks to Sacagawea's reunion with her long-lost Shoshone brother, Chief Cameo Waite, the Corps secured desperately needed horses. Then it was up and over Lolo Pass, snow to the armpits, starvation stew, candle tallow seasoned with gunpowder for zest, and men so frostbitten their complaints rattled like tin cups. Survival credit? A handful of edible camas roots and sheer American stubbornness. The Nez Perce nursed the skeleton-thin explorers back to functionality, crafted dugout canoes, and waved farewell as the party aimed downstream. The Columbia greeted them with whitewater artillery, basalt cliffs, and salmon so plentiful the river appeared to flex a silver muscle. Coastal tribes bartered with sharp acumen, no charity, only commerce, and the expedition, half delirious, paid in dull knives and patriotic speeches. Persistent Pacific squalls soon reduced everything to mildew. Powder clumped, elk jerky molded, Clark's maps blurred at the edges like sad watercolors. Yet on 15 November 1805, through salt spray haze, they beheld the Pacific. Journals exploded with exclamation marks, but triumph quickly drowned under endless sheets of winter rain. They built a log fort on soggy lowland. It rained for 106 out of 110 days. Elk herds retreated inland, forcing desperate hunting forays. Clothes rotted into wearable moss. Everyone smelled like foot-marinated leather, and morale hinged on Clark's daily joke quota. Lewis catalogued sea otters while silently drafting letters already haunted by homesickness. When March 1806 unlocked the sky just enough, the Corps voted, including Sacagawea and York, a tiny Republican miracle, to turn for home. The Pacific had been reached, measured, and pronounced very watery. Back at the Bitterroots, snow softened its murderous mood. Still, the captains hedged bets by dividing forces. Lewis pursued the rumored Marias River shortcut north. Clark and Sacagawea traced the Yellowstone south. Two storylines now, one tense, one scenic. Lewis's crew endured the expedition's only firefight. Ambushed Blackfeet warriors tried to snatch rifles at dawn, and 2 attackers fell to American muskets. Lewis, guilt-ridden yet alive, wrote that his soul felt oppressed with the melancholy reflection of the bloody scene. Translation: heroics taste bitter when friendships with tribes unravel. Clark's group floated past luminous sandstone cliffs, later dubbed Pompey's Pillar. He carved his name into the rock, creating Montana's first instance of roadside graffiti and inadvertently delighting future tourists. September 1806. Ragged, mosquito-scarred, but gloriously intact, the Corps cruised into St. Louis. Cannons boomed, citizens blinked, newspapers exclaimed that the wild men weren't dead after all. They carried 140 maps, 178 new plant species, 122 animal species, and diplomatic intel that would steer American expansion and displace native nations at catastrophic scale. Jefferson staged receptions. Eastern salons devoured tales of grisly chases and blue-plate beaver. Yet behind the applause glimmered divergent futures. Lewis spiraled into debts, political snags, and depression, ending with a gunshot along the Natchez Trace in 1809. Suicide or murder? Historians still duel. Clark prospered as territorial governor and Indian agent, though he shamefully kept York enslaved for years before grudging emancipation. Sacagawea melted into debate. Some say fever took her in 1812, others that she lived into old age among the Shoshone. Either way, her legend outshines any pewter statue, a teenage mother navigating 8,000 miles of danger with a baby on her back and a stoic smile generals envy. The legacy, America's self-mythology of exploration, equal parts courage and colonization, etched across the continent like Hadrian's lines across Britannia. Progress seldom smells like roses. Sometimes it smells like elk jerky, wet buckskin, and dreams bigger than the maps trying to contain them. Pull up a creaky wooden chair, pour yourself a goblet of room-temperature spruce-tip tea, and brace for the improbable stunt I'm about to attempt. Yoking sweaty medieval armpits, grid-perfect Indus drains, marble-mad emperors, and rain-soaked American river rats into one sweeping sudsy cosmic encore. If you've trudged with me through fleas, fortresses, and foot rot this far, you deserve the whole grand tapestry flapping in the wind. Odor is democracy's first language. Whether you're a lice-ridden 14th-century baker, a sandal-clad Babylonian tax clerk, or Meriwether Lewis crawling through Missouri cattails, your nostrils receive daily public service announcements. Something's rotting in the alley. The tanner forgot to cover his vats. The horses need mucking. The fishmonger's lying about just caught. Smell policies behavior long before law or plumbing show up. Medieval peasants threw waste from windows, partly because everyone else did, and partly because the stench signaled to pedestrians, look up or suffer consequences. The Indus Valley elite built covered sewers not only for cleanliness but to announce a shared civic identity. We agreed to live in a place that doesn't smell like the apocalypse. Kindly keep it that way. Hadrian's Rome perfumed its bathhouses with imported frankincense, so citizens would associate empire with olfactory bliss, cleverly masking the faint whiff of political executions down the street.
and Lewis's corps scouted campsites by sniffing out stagnant pools. A nose full of mosquito larva scent meant paddle another mile, lads. History's great truth. Follow the funk and you'll locate the fault lines where societies decide whether to stick together or peel apart. Picture a sliding scale. On one end sits the medieval chamber pot, brimming with anonymity and peril. On the other, Mohenjo-Daro's master drains humming like ancient air conditioners. Everything else, Hadrian's aqueduct arches, Teotihuacan's rainwater canals, Fort Mandan's frozen latrine trench, lands somewhere in between. A civilization's rank on that continuum predicts more than you'd think. Literacy rates, trade reach, political stability. Indus cities poured resources into water infrastructure instead of palace propaganda, and for 7 centuries, their standardized bricks quietly outran kings in staying power. Babylon fused sacred pageantry with clay pipes that shunted waste under Marduk's nose, allowing priests to worship without wading through offerings of last night's lentils. Hadrian drew a rock-solid line across Britain because he grasped a truth every city planner knows. If you can determine where the outhouses stop, you can declare where the empire ends. By the time Lewis and Clark lugged collapsible iron boats through cottonwood thickets, they weren't just charting rivers. They were assessing whether the West contained enough gravity-assisted infrastructure possibilities to justify manifest destiny. They took soil samples beside streams and imagined grain mills, ferry docks, sawyers' camps. If the ground drained well, settlers would follow. If not, the grand American experiment might have stalled on the muddy banks of a Dakota slough. Bathwater freaked out medieval churchmen because nakedness plus heat felt like a slippery slope toward sin, but also because it blurred boundaries. When bodies share water, hierarchies dilute. Barren sweat mingles with blacksmith's calluses. Much safer, socially and spiritually, to keep everyone sealed in linen and moral certainty. Hadrian, paradox lover, embraced the blur. He mingled with soldiers in icy Pannonian rivers, debated Stoics in steam rooms, and built baths that fused Egyptian lotus motifs with Greek pediments. To him, communal water knit an empire. To his critics, those same pools threatened to wash away old Roman virtues. Ban a bathhouse, seed rebellion, build one, risk decadence, flip a coin, history picks sides. The Corps discovered this principle in reverse. On the lower Columbia, Chinook traders pointed them to sweat lodges, timber-framed saunas where diplomacy happened at boiling point. Stripped of uniforms, the captains found themselves simply pink-skinned bipeds negotiating for salmon. Once the steam dissipated, boundaries rehardened. That oscillation merge-separate merge has driven every multicultural collision since the first stranger asked, "Mind if I borrow your soap root?" Cartography at heart is hygiene for chaos. Draw a line and you rinse uncertainty from the landscape. Medieval Europe drew almost none inside personal space, which is why directions involved phrases like left at the gallows, past the dung heap, second hovel on the right. Indus engineers etched order onto clay tablets and then onto the earth itself, streets so rectilinear you could navigate by star charts alone. Babylon covered its ideological smell with glazed brick spectacle, using avenues as narrative devices more than traffic solutions. Hadrian carried mapping inside his skull. Every mile marker he inspected burned a coordinate into policy. Lewis and Clark's hand-inked sheets turned thousand-mile rumors into reproducible geometry. When Congress looked at those parchment squiggles, they saw not just rivers but sanitary lines, proof the continent could be ordered, parceled, and yes, plumbed. The Louisiana Purchase became mentally deodorized, its unknowns scrubbed away with every new bend sketched in Clark's looping hand. Of lye soap scorched grime from medieval wool, humor scours fear from historical grime. Monks giggled beneath tonsures while swapping lice-comb horror stories. Babylonian scribes doodled lazy lions in margins, even as they recorded eclipse omens. Roman legionaries scrawled graffiti on Hadrian's wall comparing commanding officers to sheep of questionable morality. Sacagawea snickered when Clark's linguistic tongue-twister turned beaver into something obscene in Hidatsa. Laughter signaled survival. You can't crack jokes if the plague already won. Our stinky ancestors found punchlines in the same place they found faith, in that fragile gap between this is unbearable and but we're still here. Every era's soap recipe has included at least one dash of hilarity, because good luck convincing anyone to endure hand-boiled underwear day without comic relief. So now we've walked the moldy floorboards of a medieval tenement, followed brick gutters beneath an Indus solstice, strolled luminous Babylonian hypostyles, traced the cosmic avenue of Teotihuacan, marched beside a bearded emperor atop blustery moors, and paddled with half-starved Americans through salmon fog. Strip away regalia and dialects, and you'll notice we've kept circling the same tub. How do humans share space without suffocating each other? The answers rhyme even when they don't match pitch. Dig a sewer, call it civic pride. Fear the bath, call it piety. Raise a wall, call it prudence. Chart a river, call it destiny. Crack a joke, call it sanity. Whether you're clutching a linen shift, a bronze plumbing fixture, a marble drafting compass, or a soggy elk-hide moccasin, the project is identical. Scoot chaos a little farther from the doorstep. Trade one smell for a slightly less offensive one, and hope some star-aligned architect of tomorrow grades your efforts kindly. Hadrian thought marble could fossilize peace. Teotihuacan's planners figured geometry might coax gods to linger. Lewis logged latitudes convinced science could civilize wilderness. Medieval villagers settled for vinegar wipes and perfumed pomanders, and somehow their descendants invented microchips. History's punchline: even half-successful hygiene buys enough time for genius to hatch elsewhere. So the next time your shower sputters lukewarm, or the city digs up your street to reroute a sewer main, imagine you're hearing echoes: monks debating bath demons, Indus masons laying brick on cosmic brick, Roman surveyors aligning aqueduct arches with mountain passes, Sacagawea hefting a canoe while her infant coos. Picture the whole fragrant procession cheering your modern frustration because, surprise, you're part of their continuum. Turn the tap, let water roar, and remember you're soaking in 5,000 years of communal engineering, paranoia, artistry, and accidental comedy. And if, after all this, you still catch a whiff of garlic sweat nostalgia from the medieval lane we started on, just smile. It's history waving its scented handkerchief, reminding you that progress has a smell, and occasionally it's still hilarious.